Welcome to the Little Sparks Podcast, your home for all things faith and music. I'm Cecilia.
And I'm Tara.
And we're former college roommates, professional musicians, and co-founders of the Hildegard Collective, a space for Catholic musicians to connect with one another and grow in their faith and profession. This podcast is an outreach of the collective, so if you're interested at all in Catholicism, music, or both, this is the podcast for you. Join us each week as we get real, share stories, and learn from other awesome Catholic musicians. We're all little sparks of God's divine creation, so together, let's ignite the world for Christ.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Little Sparks podcast. We are delighted to have a very, very special guest with us today. We are going to be talking all about music and motherhood. So we thought no better woman to bring on today's episode than Cecilia's very own mother. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Cecilia.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've been wanting to do an episode on, I was saying to you before Tara even got on, we've been wanting to do an episode on music and like being balancing motherhood with being a musician since I think we started this podcast. So it's like really exciting that we're finally actually able to go ahead and do that now. So yeah, so we're excited.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So to kick things off, would you like to share with us a little bit about your musical background and about your faith background as well?
Sure. So my musical and faith background really goes back to my parents. Musically, my dad grew up in a relatively poor family, but for some reason they decided to get him piano lessons. I know he had to clean out the music store to help pay for the rental of the piano and his lessons. He was pretty young and he was like a virtuosic pianist. His teacher was trying to get him ready to audition. They lived in the middle of Wisconsin. She was trying to get him ready to audition for Juilliard. He was that good. He was playing Rachmaninoff piano concertos when he was in middle school. So unfortunately, they missed a payment on the piano and the store repossessed the piano. And that was the end of my dad's piano career. His teacher cried bitterly about it, but there was always this musicalness in him. When he got to high school, he was in a barbershop quartet. He was always into music. Music was very important to him, and he was very accomplished. My mother wanted to always play the piano, and she grew up on a dairy farm in the middle of Wisconsin, and her mother always said, well, you just wait till you get to high school, and then you can play an instrument. And they ended up sending her to a Catholic high school about an hour away. She lived there, and she somehow, the band director, he influenced her to play the saxophone. She never got to play the piano. That plays a part in my life. She had to play the saxophone. And even after high school, she still would pull out that saxophone and play it because my dad was dating her roommate for a while and, 6 years later, and he would reminisce how he heard her playing the saxophone upstairs. So music was always in her heart as well. So when it came to myself and my siblings, it was a non-negotiable that we were all going to learn to play the piano because of my dad's talent and my mother's desire. So that's how I got started on musical instruments, was on the piano in fourth grade. And funny story is, my first teacher, Mrs. Yamagata, was a student of Shinichi Suzuki. So I learned in the Suzuki method under her, and she was fantastic. I ended up playing piano all the way through high school, ended up auditioning for music school on piano and voice. That's another story. I also was in the church choir from a very young age, 3 years old, I think. We were really blessed in my parish to have a young man at the time. He was 19 years old. He was not a music major, but he took organ lessons from the organ professor at Penn State. I grew up in State College, Pennsylvania. And he started the music program at our church. And he was so enthusiastic So we had 3 or 4 children's choirs, a sanctuary choir, which was the adult choir. He started handbell choirs, which I was involved in. He was also our music teacher at school. So he was a very good music teacher. Um, he had this thing called the Interval Olympics. He would play intervals on the piano, and we had to sing them back and tell him what interval it was. Like, it was really, by the time I got to college, I could sight read anything.
Wow.
I was really blessed. So in musically, and then when I went to college, I ended up, so in high school, I joined the choirs at the local public high school. And I went to district choir. And I think at that time, I only went to district choir because of my musical ability. I could not sing very well at all. I couldn't sing above a high F, the F above the F above middle C. I couldn't even sing that F. Like, I was an alto through and through because my voice was limited. But I went to this district choir festival. I squeezed into regionals, and I was just so impressed by the director. I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. Prior to that, I had wanted to go into science, but it was just music was such a part of me because of my family background, and it was such a impressive experience to me. The type of music we were singing, the joy that the conductor had, it just changed my whole outlook on my future. So I did start after that year. I started voice lessons that summer, and funny thing, my brother was dating a girl who was a music major at Penn State, and she was graduating, and she was going to the Hart School of Music, and she was so gung ho on it. And so I would never. I mean, we didn't have the internet, right? So you only knew what you knew, whatever posters were sent to the high school. Maybe if you put down that you were interested in music on the SATs, you would get some school sending you information. So I heard about the Hart School, which is attached to the University of Hartford in West Hartford, Connecticut, from her. And she was so impressed by it. At the time, the music education faculty was some of the best in the country. And so I auditioned there for voice and piano along with music education. I really wanted to go on voice. I had been to voice lessons, helped me out. I had been to All States twice, All East, and but I had bronchitis the weekend of my audition. So
Oh,
I had
that's
this like
devastating.
102 fever driving from Pennsylvania to West Hartford, Connecticut. I went in, I auditioned on both, but obviously my voice was not up to par. But they offered me a scholarship on my piano playing, and I also had an academic scholarship. So I ended up with a full scholarship to go there on piano, and that's what I did. That's and then I ended up switching over to voice. I took voice lessons with the community division that fall, re-auditioned. They accepted me in voice, and I asked if they could keep my scholarship from piano, and they said yes. And that's how I ended up in voice and piano, voice performance and music education there. So that was my basic background in music. My faith background, my father grew up in he went to Catholic school, grew up in a broken home. That really affected his faith journey with the Lord. He had prayed very hard that his parents would stay together, and that just didn't happen. And he kind of fell away from the church, but he met my mother. My mother was an incredibly faithful Catholic. Her family was very faithful. But my dad was very moral. So he always went to mass with my mom. He didn't receive the sacraments again until I was in elementary school. I remember we would pray every week. My mom would have us pray for him. And I remember the week he went back to confession and then communion, the Lord really worked on his heart. And so growing up, we always had discussions about moral things at the dinner table. We would talk about the pressing issues of the time. So from my dad, I mean, my mother's a very moral person too, but from my dad, I received that education more. And from my mom, I received this wonderful faith background. Our lives revolved around the church. We went to everything the church offered, during Lent, Stations of the Cross back in the day. And it was interesting because this was right post Vatican II. It was like the black hole that had hit the Catholic Church, right? I grew up my first couple of years with sisters who like wore mini skirts and spiky high heels, and they were cool looking. And by fourth grade, the sister came in and said, "I'm no longer sister so and so. I miss so and so." And it was just my fourth grade religion class. I remember singing social justice songs like "If I Had a Hammer" and "One Tin Soldier," and it was just not the most shining time of the Catholic Church. But I had two things. We had this wonderful music program at the church. The church was named Our Lady of Victory, so there was a devotion to Our Lady, even when the devotion to Our Lady had left many, many churches. So we still went to like October and May devotions. And I was in so many music programs within the church that, oftentimes on holidays, I was doing double duty, triple duty. I was going to all kinds of masses. And it was ecumenical time too, post Vatican II, right? So we would have musical things with the other churches in the town. So the church was a huge part of my life. So when I went to college, that was my moment of truth, right? Am I going to stay Catholic? Am I going to keep going to Mass? Like all of us have. We all leave home and we have to decide whether it's our own or not. I had a really beautiful experience. Our church choir sang in Rome. When I was 16, we went to Rome and sang there. And I remember having a very spiritual experience when I went to St. Peter's. And realizing the beauty of the church as this overarching, it wasn't just my parish, it was this beautiful overarching thing. It was just kind of a moment that the Lord put in my heart that I think started my growth and making my faith my own. But when I went to college, I remember, you got that first Sunday, and I went to a secular college, obviously, and the girl down the hall was like, "Anybody want to go to Mass with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you." And I remember going to Mass, and I was homesick already, and I just started crying because I felt like, I was home, because the church had been such a part of my life. So I continued to practice my faith, and my mother, I didn't say this earlier, she made us go to daily Mass when we were growing up, which in the 70s, like nobody did that. I used to count the number of people at daily Mass. I'd be like, "Ooh, 12. We got 12 today." We're, double digits. So, but, she always said to me, "I never asked the priest," because at the time there was so much confusion. We knew so many people that had left the priesthood or the religious life, and there was just a lot of confusion going on then. And she's like, "I never asked a priest if I should take you guys to daily Mass because I knew they would tell me that I shouldn't force you," but she did. She made us go in the summers and on Saturdays during the school year, and it was a real blessing, actually, because it's something I've kept with me my whole life. And when I was in school, when they had daily Mass, which wasn't every day, maybe once a week, and I would go to that. And I started a pro-life group because that was a huge part of growing up, was the pro-life movement. So yeah, so that's my faith and music background.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like I learned some new things in there myself, and I thought I knew it all already, which is kind of funny.
Well, I guess I could, because this is moving up to motherhood. I should go a little bit further if you want me to get you to the.
Oh, that would be great, actually. That would segue nicely in.
Okay, so then after college, I was auditioning for graduate schools for voice performance. I auditioned for Manhattan School of Music and the New England Conservatory. I got into both at the time. So I've always been a very driven person. At the time, the Manhattan School of Music, the professor that wanted me to study with her, she's like, "We just don't offer soprano scholarships." Basically, we're a dime a dozen, right? So that there was no money there. I did get some scholarship at New England, but I'm very practical minded too. So I thought, well, I was engaged to be married. I was like, I'm just going to go and teach and find another way to sing. So I started teaching at a public school on Long Island where my husband was had just finished his graduate work, and he had a position there. And I started singing on the side. I studied with a teacher in the area, and she introduced me to someone in New York who at the time had trained Renee Fleming, and she was very encouraging to me. And at the time, I mean, this is like 30 years ago, right? At the time, I don't know what it is now, but there were backdoor ways to get into the opera world without a graduate degree. She really encouraged me to move in the direction of auditioning for the Metropolitan Opera chorus and move in that direction, because there were some singers that were singing there that had made their way through that avenue. I started to do some competitions. That was going well. And then I got pregnant with Cecilia. So.
And here we all are.
Here we all are. And I didn't want to raise my kids on Long Island. Long Island's a nice place, but I knew I would have to work. And like I said, I was a very driven person, but I'm an all or nothing person. I'd seen how hard my mom worked to raise us. I knew what the world was turning into. God was very good to me, because the night my husband proposed to me, I'm not really like vision type person, but he gave me this vision, and it was like a split second. It was two pathways. One pathway was with Paul, with my husband and a family, what my life would be like. And one was what it would be like if I just went my own route. So when I said yes, I knew what I was saying yes to. It was a very real gift from God, because I love music, and music is very important to me. But I also understood the challenges that motherhood brings, the work that I'd seen my mother put into it. And I think because of my personality, it was just a moment of grace from God. So we ended up getting a job in central Pennsylvania. We ended back here in State College area. And that I left the public schools. I started teaching privately and singing in the area. And we were involved with our music program, of course, at church.
Always church music.
Yes, always church music.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't you go back to teaching voice lessons when I was 3 weeks old or something like that?
2 weeks old. And we lived out in the country, so if you needed to be nursed, nobody even batted an eye. I mean, it was just as different. I taught piano and voice back then when we lived out in the country, because his first job was about 30 miles outside of State College, very rural area, wonderful people. But yes, so I started right back into it. I started taking lessons from someone at Penn State just to keep my voice in shape. And he was very good to me and helped me get some singing gigs. And also I sang with some orchestras. And I also started teaching at a local college, private, adjunctly, when Cecilia was about 3. I did that for a few years.
So what are some of the challenges that you have faced, over the years in discerning how to balance your career as a musician with, the responsibilities and duties of motherhood?
So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how you often say you have that prayer, Lord, unclench my fists, right? So God has been very gentle to me. We didn't have all the resources. That saying where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. I know things are really difficult for your generation, but there are so many graces that you can tap into with the internet and all of that. We didn't have all that. Again, we had JP2. Praise God for JP2, right? And then his Benedict. after him. But we had to find things. We had to find our way. Like theology of the body, which is like commonplace now. We didn't even learn about it till you were 7, Cecilia, and we were on top of things. So it was just a different time. So I think God needed to slowly unpry my fingers from my clenched fist because, like I said, I was a very driven person. I mean, I was always striving to be the best. It's just in my nature. Um, and so the first finger he pried open was that little vision he gave me of when your dad proposed to me, Paul proposed to me. So that was the first finger that I punched. The second one was after Cecilia was born, I dealt with secondary infertility. She was 7 years old when her sister was born. And I won't go into that whole thing, except for to say that when her sister was finally born, he had done a few more fingers. And I decided at that point, because I had so desperately wanted another child and I had experienced the pain of secondary infertility, I had decided at that point to let go of my lessons and singing. And I wanted to pour all my attention into parenting. I think that had that not happened, I would never have taken a break in my music making. Mm-hmm. And we're all given different gifts and talents because I'm so focused, is such a focused individual. I don't know if balancing things would have been my best option. I don't know how well that would have worked in my family life. So, the Lord, he gently led me to what he wanted for me at the time. I mean, I've gone back to teaching here and there. I've always sung in my church. I was sharing with Cecilia before we got on that I've been feeling called to maybe go back to, even after I graduate my third child this year, and I just will have 2 home. I'm thinking I'll go back to singing in the local community choir and just start getting back into things. So I'm starting to feel that call back. But if you ask me how the challenges of how that's been, it's really just been listening to the Lord and knowing myself. I think self-knowledge is self-reflection is very important, and just sitting with the Lord and allowing him to show you who you are and what he's designed you for is very important. And it looks different at different times of your life, what he's asking you to do. But you are who you are. And when you know yourself, it's funny because in college, my voice teacher, after I got into these schools and after I've done so much, and I got engaged, she says to me, "Oh, Olivia, you were meant to be a mom." And I was just like, "That's what all this work." But she was a lovely woman. She was a very talented woman. She had her town hall debut in New York back in the day, and she had sung but she knew me after 5 years of working with me. And I didn't know myself in some ways as well as she did, I think. I was a little taken aback and insulted, but I let it go and be like, whatever, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I mean, we're to the point that even before Cecilia was conceived, I was thinking about this. At the time, I'm not really up to what the scene is like now, but at the time, if you wanted to make it in the United States, you went abroad. You went to Europe to make it first. And we had, as I was starting to win competitions, and I had this really positive lesson with this coach from the Met, my husband was like, "Let's go for it. I'll just follow you," and that's where I thought my life was going to go, but it didn't. And I am really happy it didn't. I wouldn't give up my 5 kids for the life of me. And it's funny because at the time, you would look at like Renee Fleming, she was married and had children. Look, she can do it. And Dawn Upshaw, she would take her children with her. I mean, these were the people of the time, right? And I remember thinking, well, that's what I can do. And then I saw a 60 minutes interview of Beverly Sills. And I don't, you know who Beverly Sills is, correct? And she's
Yes,
been
of
dead for
course.
a while, but she was amazing, right? And I remember her saying, the interviewer asked her, I looked this up last night. I tried to find the interview and I couldn't find it online, but the interviewer asked her something like, is there anything you regret? And she said, yeah, I regret being away from my family so much. She's like, I remember once my daughter was like, I don't know, preschool age or something, and I was leaving again for a performance, and I said, okay, sweetie, mommy's got to go, and I love you. And she says, okay, mommy, love you. And then she turned around to the nanny and she goes, okay, mommy, let's go. And she just walked away like it was nothing. And she called the nanny a mom. And she's like, that broke her heart, right? And so she
Mm.
does regret that. I thought, oh, made me pause. Like there are, you can't have it all. Here's a woman who seemed to have it all and she didn't. And it made me think about my own choices. So, but I guess the biggest thing I learned was that if you just listen to God and if you know who you are and what you actually can accomplish, what you're good at, there are some women that can absolutely juggle a lot. I don't think I'm one of those. I juggle a lot, but I don't think I could have juggled a full-time career and do what I wanted to do as a mother because I ended up having 5 children. I've homeschooled them all. Um, that was more important to me. I wanted to do that. I felt called to do that. So I've used my music, but I definitely put it on the back burner for many years now.
Yeah. It sounds like a matter of really just figuring out what your priorities are and what's important to you.
Well, what you're called to do, because as you know, Cecilia, my mantra with my kids is God has created you for something. He's given you gifts,
Yeah.
he's given you talents, and you will be happiest when you follow that. So, there are some women who are like they can get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night and do everything they want to do. And really, I mean, you have to. If you want to do everything you want to do, you have to be someone who can live on little sleep and can be very organized. And I don't know if I know that's not me. I need my sleep at night. I needed to have um, a less busy schedule so I could give everyone the attention they needed. And, when I was first a mom, my husband gave me the book, Fulton Sheen's The World's First Love. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful book about the Blessed Mother. But in it, he says, um, I'm paraphrasing, he says something to the effect of, the Lord makes a crown for each child, and woe to that parent who does not prepare that child for its crown in heaven. And that is so, that
I
hit me
got
like a ton of
chills.
bricks. Yes, that hit me like
Whoa.
a ton of bricks. And it made me see parenting very different. It's not just about raising your child, raising them in the faith, giving them the advantages that you want to give them for the world so they can be successful, la, la, la. It's about getting them ready to accept the crown in heaven that the Lord has prepared for them. That is huge. And so you have to take into consideration your own gifts, strengths, talents, weaknesses to see how, and God's will for your life, to see how you can accomplish that. Because once you have a child, everything changes. Even if you don't want it to change or you don't want it to be different, it does change.
And at the time when you were, I suppose when God was revealing to you that he was slowly unclenching your fingers from this life that you'd envisioned for yourself, did you have any hesitancy at the time of letting go of, I suppose, these particular visions and dreams for your life?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is that I don't have a lot of fears in my life, but one of my fears is that I'm going to miss out on doing something God wants me to do. So, like, I'm one of those person that might go kicking and screaming into it, but I'll do it because I'm afraid what will happen. Like, who will I bear? Like, what will I say to God when I die? When I was like, I didn't want to listen opportunity of that time, I went my own way. I might, like I said, I might not be like go into it graciously, but I'm usually okay. But so that's one of my thoughts. Um, it happens so naturally and gently that, and that I always say, God has always been gentle with me. I really, it must be who I am as a person. He knows that he can't slap me with anything too hard, or I'd probably fall apart. You know, but he's always been very gentle with me. Except for the infertility, really threw me for a loop. That one I was very upset with the Lord for. Um, but I will say that I don't, like I said, I don't know if I wouldn't have gone through that suffering if I would have given up the music. I was so grateful when I finally was able to get pregnant. And there were some beautiful circumstances around that um, whole situation that I was just, you know, with Cecilia, when she was born, I was very grateful for her too, but I got hallucinated. I was so tired. Like, I mean, I just was like trying to survive. When my second daughter, Mary, was born, I could have gotten up 10 times a night, and I was just had a beaming smile on my face. It's not that I didn't enjoy having Cecilia. It's just when you have wished for something for so long, and the miraculous things that happened to allow it to have to for me to get pregnant, that was like the most important thing. Nothing could have been. I could have been given the opportunity to star in the Met for an entire season for the rest of my life, and that would have paled into comparison of being able to have another child. So it was such a gift that I was ready to give up anything for it. And maybe I didn't have to give it up for it, but I was feeling like I didn't want to miss out on any moment after the suffering that I went through. I didn't want to miss a single moment of that. So that's where I ended up with that. But I have gone back and done some teaching, a little bit of singing here and there, but not as much, just at church. I did go through a time when I just wanted to sing at church. I I'm very text driven person, and I just love singing. As I got older, I just love more and more singing um, religious themed music. You know, so that's where I really wanted to sing. I didn't want to sing secular music for a while. That's just who I am. Like that's just where I was in my life. I go back and sing secular music now, but just for that time of my life, I just want. So that was like my outlet for singing, and I did go back to teaching here and there, mostly out of financial necessity. But I had some wonderful moments, and I love teaching. I just started teaching preschoolers music at a homeschool co-op again. I forgot how much I enjoyed it. So this has been fun for me. But I guess it's just another example of God gives you what He wants you to do when He wants you to do it. And I never felt a need to go make things happen because I felt like God had His hand strongly in my life. And that just like I preach to my children, He had a plan and purpose. So, like, just like the other day when I thought, I think it's time to go back. I was listening to the Messiah, and I just heard this little voice say, "Would you like to sing that again?" You know, I'm like, yeah, I kind of would. So we'll see what happens. If the Lord wants it, it'll all start to fall back in place.
That's really beautiful.
I love that. So, was there any advice you would give to new moms who are, looking how to, best be present as a mother while still pursuing music?
Well, remember that music is a career and motherhood is a vocation. Of course, there are aspects of music that are vocation-like, right? But the highest order is God, family, right? Friends, work. So when making choices. And I think that, well, there are different pressures the world brings upon you, especially when you're younger, especially when you put so much time and effort into honing your craft. So there's a natural, I don't even say it's an expectation, but it's like ingrained in you. For me, I grew up during the 80s, right? The 70s and 80s when women were entering the workforce. It was very much preached to us that we needed to get out work and be, but you guys call them girl bosses. We just wanted to be like men at the time. That's what we, that ideal. And so there was a lot of emphasis on that, which I think is probably still there. And it was ingrained and inculcated into you. So I think that in order to best serve your family, you have to think about serving God and what He wants and looking at the family first and their needs. And if there's a time when it's not working, you have to reevaluate. And if it's working, then maybe that's God's plan for your life like that. There were several times I went back to teaching privately. Like I said, we needed financial. My husband's a teacher, right? So there was financial needs, especially when Cecilia went to college. I tried going back at one point, and the kids, because my husband's away with his band so much, his work as a band director, high school band director, they have a lot of crazy hours. It just wasn't always working. The little kids needed more help, and so I just put it aside, trust in the Lord that He had another plan. I'm right now. I'm not teaching. I was teaching all the way up to COVID, taught through part of COVID, and then I felt that the Lord was just saying, I have a lot of high schoolers, right, as children right now, and they have activities and things in the evening when you're going to teach. So it's like another time in my life where I have to stop and say, where are my priorities? The kids are going to be gone in a couple of years, and I want to see their sports events. So I know I was missing things, and so I just put that aside for now. But that can change on a dime because they're all growing up and leaving me. so it's just praying and talking with your spouse and having open lines of communication and being open to not have to be so invested in the thing you've invested your life in. Because really what we are trying to invest our life into most is becoming saints, right? And how God wants to use that, how He wants to use us and use our gifts and talents to help us towards that, or use our circumstances in life. Motherhood will help you towards sanctity if you let it. There's always challenges, and you have to grow patience and all of that. But just to spend and make sure you have time to pray as a new mom, that you take that time to meditate and think, like be with the Lord, rest in the Lord, even if you just 15 minutes, you can grab it somewhere. You can grab 15 minutes somewhere, and that will help you to discern what He wants of you. And your children, and the way your children behave and act, you'll see whether it's working or not. Is the household peaceful? Are the kids at each other's throat because they're not getting enough parent time? Do you have a system that works? Do you have family close by that can help you? We did, right, Cecilia? I mean, Grandma.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, she would watch you when I taught at the college, and sometimes when I went singing to places. I remember once I was getting some extra training. I had a very, very talented student who sings professionally now. She started singing professionally when she was like 13, I think. So I went and got some extra training for some of the things that they wanted her to do. And my mom and dad went along, and Cecilia had a great time in Washington, D.C. and the caves and in Virginia. And, so I have a great support system in my family that has helped with the kids along the way. Because if you're married to a musician like me, you can't depend on, disposable income to hire babysitters. And don't kill
Tara, do
yourself.
you have any?
I would say that. Don't kill yourself. Motherhood is hard. A new mother, give yourself some grace. And you'll figure your way through it.
It's great. It's great. It's really nice. It's really refreshing to kind of get this perspective. Because I think so much of our world is very all or nothing. And I feel like, especially in music, from like even college professors and stuff, I feel like when I think back to the advice that I've been given in this professional sector and in the academic world as well, it's either like you have to sacrifice everything else on the altar of music, or it's like, no, don't worry about it. You can do it all. You can have everything you want and a piece of cake. And it's really refreshing to hear this very honest discourse about how neither of those are really true.
They don't have to be true. People try to live that way, but it's not really a Christian perspective, I don't think. Again, we grow up in this, or we're educated in this secular world, and even if we're educated in a non-secular institution, the secular world is very pressing upon everything. So, yeah, I remember my mom saying to me when I decided to go into music, my dad was like, "Oh no," he's like, "I was hoping you do engineering." And my mom was like, "Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea because you could do it part-time if you need to." And I was like, whatever, like I don't do anything part-time. Like I was just, like I said, I was a really driven person, but her mother had told her, always, you'll have to always have something to fall back on in case your husband would lose his job or he would pass on. Very practical. I come from a long line of practical German women. So she was seeing it as an opportunity for me to be able to make money for the family if need be, which is I've had to sometimes, but it can be very flexible, which is really it is a blessing. There are lots of, and not only that, it's been such a blessing for my children. I think that giving them this gift of music. So when you're in another field of study, I think you obviously bring it into your family life because you studied it or whatever, but music is just such a part of being a human being. So my kids have been sung to from, in utero on. They've all had lessons, and I wish we wouldn't have been as busy as we were because I would have loved to have done more music. Being pre all this technological stuff growing up, I remember being, I don't know, 5 years old. I have this vivid memory of sitting next to my mother. My older brother was on one side, I was on the other. I think my sister was on my mom's lap, and she would sing like these songs, and we would harmonize at such a young age. But it was because we had time. Like, we were on tablets, we weren't on, we didn't even have cable back then. So there wasn't really anything to watch on TV except for the news and then the evening programs, or PBS maybe. So it's just this gift of music is such something you can give your children that is, I've never not done music. It's just changed. The form of it has changed depending on the season of my life. And that's because it's partially my own choice and partially because I was just trying to, follow God's will. Because in the end, that's all that really matters, right? Following God's will. Because this life is not forever. And all these careers that we have are a means to an end. They're not an end in and of themselves. So, which I know you girls have both been in music school. You study so hard and it's so intense. And it's all consuming. Like I graduated with 188 credits, I think. Like who graduates with 188 credits? Music students, because we all these piddly classes we have to take, right? And so it's all encompassing. So you feel like it's the end. in and of itself sometimes. So
Yeah, that's very true. It's just so intense, you know?
mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely see how music like has benefited me, you know, in my life. Obviously being a musician, but like, you know, even just like watching you teach voice lessons from
Mm-hmm.
literally such a young age, you know, since you went back when I was 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
Like I feel like when I jumped into teaching, it was it was just it was just very natural because I had, you know, grown up observing you do that, you know, from time to time. In terms of like, you know, periods of time in my life when you taught versus when you didn't. Um, and it is nice that it is so flexible, you know, teaching private lessons. So I'm
Yes.
like, I'm hoping that I can, you know, get back into teaching a little bit sometime after baby girl's born. But like, you know, I feel like I don't have, and maybe it's, I think because of your own example, like I don't feel like I have to have a full studio, you know, I could teach like probably 2 or 3 students and be very content with that, you know, um, just like being able to share that gift, you know, with more people, but like not I don't know. I think, you know, because of your example there, I don't feel like a pressure to have to do it full time, which is really freeing. So
Yeah. And I have my own philosophy with teaching private lessons too, because I working with young people, and you see, especially working with them through COVID, changed some of my perspective. You see just how young people are struggling so much. So even though I'm a really driven person and I've always had a very high expectation of my students, I have always tried to make my studio a place where when they walked in, they knew they were loved and cared for and accepted. And, um, you know, that it was a safe place for them. And I don't want to use like secular words, but that's, you know, a place where they could just enjoy themselves, enjoy music. Um, and my students have done well. So it's not like I just make it a happy place, but I just see that need. And so as a teaching is such a, it's a very, um, we need mentors more than teachers. So I try to mentor them in a way, um,
mm,
in whatever way it seemed appropriate. You know, you don't force that on a person, but you know, I always ask them, you know, how's your day going? Are you having a good week? You know, I try to take an interest in their lives, not just them as a student of music, but as a person, that, you know, human dignity. So there's a lot that you can do as a musician to help. I mean, music in and of itself is beautiful, right? Yeah, I know you guys talk about the beauty of music, but we have this opportunity, especially as teachers, to be able to affect in a positive way young people. Um, you know, my husband and I have talked about how when we were growing up, there were a lot of mainline Protestants still. Most people we knew were baptized. Most of the kids we know today are not baptized. It's a very different world that we live in. So there's a great need
yeah.
for Catholics to be in the teaching sphere, um, even in secular. I mean, obviously, I was not running a religious studio, but just showing these kids that they were valued. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot of work to be done. So, but that's a whole topic for a different day, right?
Yeah. Very, very true. And just one final thought of mine before we kind of wrap things up is that, like, what came to mind when you were talking about, you know, just making your studio a place that students felt welcomed and, you know, seen and cared for. That's honestly a form of spiritual motherhood right there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yes.
mentorship that you can offer as a music teacher. So it's almost like another expression of motherhood altogether, you know?
Yes. I had one student um, that I kept. So eventually I cut my studio way back because there just needs, like I said, I was having a bunch of teenagers. They needed more of my presence in the evenings, but I kept one student she was an only child. During COVID, I just watched her waste away. As soon as I could get her in, we have a solarium in our backyard, like a sunroom. As soon as I could get her in there for lessons and off of the video, things were still shut down pretty much, we would have lessons in my backyard because I knew she needed human interaction. Um, and, I did everything I could to make people feel safe because obviously there was this great fear at the time. But, um, she just, these kids really suffered through COVID. Um, and yeah, she's doing good now. She's in science, but she's minoring in music because she loves singing so much. So that's good.
Oh, that's so great. I love that.
But yeah. So yes, being a teacher there was definitely an aspect of spiritual motherhood because I would look at this young lady online and as I was teaching online, and I had taught her since she was in 7th grade, and I would just see that she was suffering, and so the mother in me wanted to alleviate that suffering. Yeah. So
I actually was subbing today for one of our voice teachers who was sick, and I had one of his students come in, and I had never met this particular student before. We have I think we have something around 800 music students who come in on a weekly basis for lessons and group classes and stuff. So there are many of them who I've never met before. But I brought him in for his lesson, and I was kind of chatting to him about, how long he'd been singing and what kind of pieces he was working on, what sort of technical skills he was working on improving, and I sensed pretty quickly that he had some kind of special needs. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what, but just the way he carried himself and the way that he spoke. And we were singing, and I was just working him through some just very simple, basic kind of warm-up exercises because he'd only been singing since September. So he's very new, and he's a high school student. And after one of the warm-ups, I just complimented his tone. I said, wow, you have a lovely voice. I really like the tone, especially near the end of that exercise there. And he looked at me totally shocked. And he was like, you are the first person to ever tell me that. I can't believe you just said that to me. And I was like, it broke my heart a little bit because I could tell that that very simple compliment just meant so much to him. And it was something that he held on to, and he thanked me for in particular at the end of the lesson. It was only a 30-minute lesson, so unfortunately I didn't get too much time to really work with him and get into the meat of his voice. But I think being attentive to that aspect of spiritual motherhood in teaching is so crucial, because that's, I think, beyond just the skills that they're learning, that is what really touches people's hearts and changes their lives,
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
If you want the beauty of music to penetrate into their souls, it can't just be a technical exercise, right? Music is a part of who you are as a person. And the thing is, when you're teaching students, oftentimes it comes down to just a technical exercise, especially at the beginning. Teaching basic vocal technique is it's probably like with every instrument. It takes time to really establish that. It takes a lot of work and attention, and then a lot of times you don't put the musicality on until the very end of polishing your piece or whatever. So they don't. If you want them to see the beauty of music, so you really have to take an interest in, I think, in who they are as a person, and make it a enjoyable learning technique, as an enjoyable experience and a positive experience for them, so you can keep the joy of music while you integrate musicianship where you can. Yeah.
Well, on that note, shall we share what we've all been listening to lately?
Yes. Cecilia, why don't you go first? You never go first.
I have been listening on the Hallow app, actually, to this this short playlist by a Catholic composer who's done some film work and other various projects. I think his name is Sean Beeson. And the playlist is called Emmanuel. And it's all these like really lovely, very meditative orchestral arrangements of some different Advent and Christmas hymns. And they are just beautiful. I'm pretty sure you have to like have a paid subscription to Hallow to access it. But if you do have a paid subscription to Hallow and you can access it, I really, really recommend listening to it. It's been nice to just have on in the background, especially in the mornings when I'm, getting ready and, getting things started for the day and all that, to just kind of ease into the day with. So that's what I've been listening to.
I'll go next. So I've been getting more back into listening to choral music. I don't know why I've been inspired to, but I have. So up until Advent, I was listening to the Bach B minor Mass. I've always told my kids I want them to take any inheritance that might be due to them and hire a choir and orchestra to sing it at my funeral. Singing the Bach B minor Mass is probably one of the best musical experiences I've ever had in my life, and I just love that work. Then I've been inspired to listen to the Messiah lately, since I'm not singing it. It's something that when you're not a musician playing or singing it all season, you start to miss it. So I've been listening to that. I pulled out some when I was thinking about Beverly Sills. I pulled out some of her things. She's just amazing, and she's been amazing her whole life. She started as a young girl singing, and just has always had a beautiful voice. And then lastly, last year, Cecilia and I played for the Prelude, the piano guys, O Come, Emmanuel. So I pulled that back out, and actually I pulled it out to play with my husband. I'll accompany him. It's just really beautifully done. Very meditative.
I love that arrangement of O Come, Emmanuel. It's so beautiful.
The piano guys are like next level.
They really are. There's very little piano guys that I listen to and I don't like, like I like pretty much almost everything they've done. If you haven't listened to, I think it's We Three Kings. Their arrangement of We Three Kings is a total bop. Like I've never heard anything like it. They take it and they make it all jazzy and put it in 4/4, and it's really unique.
That's really interesting, actually. I'll have to go give that a listen.
Yeah, lots of fun. So there's a bonus thing to listen to. What have you been listening to, Tara?
I've been listening to a lot of musical theater recently, actually, because one of my students is entering a musical theater competition in February. Will be the competition, and I am really gung-ho on finding her some new repertoire for this competition. She has extremely particular taste in terms of what she likes and what she doesn't. So I have been really trying to expand my horizons and listen to like a variety of possibilities from the musical theater repertoire that she could bring to this competition and hopefully really enjoy learning and performing. But I keep coming back to one of my favorite musicals, Daddy Longlegs. And there's a particular song called The Color of Your Eyes that just gets me every time. And the really famous song from that musical is called The Secret of Happiness. And that song's fine. It's fun to perform. The message is really nice. I understand why people enjoy performing it. I also think they made the sheet music free for that song, which is also a plus. But
nice.
The Color of Your Eyes, to me, is like the high point of that whole album and that whole musical, musically speaking anyway, because it is just so, there's such a sweet innocence to the lyrics of that song. And it just is so, it's just so fun and lighthearted and nice and pleasant to listen to and really enjoyable to sing. And I don't think it's one that my student would like, but just for my own pleasure and my own enjoyment, I've really had a lot of fun listening back to that piece, interspersing it within the rest of my musical theater listening. So that would be my recommendation for this week.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. Well, thank you, Mom, for coming on.
Yeah, I have one other little recommendation for those of you who like tech. So as I was looking through this, like listening to Beverly Sills, Danny Kaye did a program in 1975. It's a part of a CBS Young People's program, and it was a visit to, I'm not saying it right, but if you type it in, it's in the Library of Congress part of it, a visit to the Metropolitan Opera. And they had all these children filling the entire opera house, and he went through and explained to them how they made snow, like all this stuff. The prop guy who's underneath the stage, I'm sure some of it's different now with the technology we have. But it was, and Beverly Sills came on, and they did this skit, and it was so well done. It's so funny, it's just so funny. So if you want just 10 minutes of really enjoyable walk back memory lane, I highly recommend looking that up.
I love that. I love
fun.
watching stuff like that, the behind the scenes. That is so cute. That is so much fun.
And he's so funny and so talented. So
I love Danny Kaye. He's so great. Well, thank you so much, Mom, for coming on and chatting about music and motherhood with us. There's a lot of words of wisdom in there. And I think it will really bless our listeners.
I know I need to go back and rewatch this episode now that we've just finished recording it, because I need to take notes this time. There was so much wisdom. So thank you. I feel really just inspired.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, to everyone tuning in, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week. Know that you're in our prayers, and God bless.
God bless.
God bless you all.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Little Sparks podcast. For more information on this podcast and our ministry, please visit www.thehildegardcollective.com.